Sounds very rock star.
Kia ora, no mai haere mai. Welcome to the ordinary meeting of council this morning. Call for apologies. We have an apology from Eric Roy and Alistair Gibson. Moved by Neville, seconded by Peter. All in favour say aye. Aye. Declarations of interest. I haven't been made aware of them this morning. Public forums, petitions, deputations. Also not aware of any this morning. So item 5 is confirmation of minutes. So we'll move to the confirmation of minutes for the meeting of council, which was held on the 25th of June. Moved by Jeremy, seconded for that, seconded by Lyndall. No alterations, additions, etc. Morris.
Just a question about the meeting. I'm sorry, I should know. When we had a presentation from people wanting us to do something about the situation in Palestine. About our procurement. Have we done anything about that?
I know we recommended that the staff would do a high level look at the situation. I'm not aware of anything coming back to us at this stage of it.
Can we have Wilma, can you?
So yes, it's a matter that we have noted to get on with the work. It was not a priority for this meeting, but it will be done before the end of training.
It's going to the next.
Yeah, it's going to the next meeting. Thank you.
So we are preparing a report for the financing performance community on this
Thank you.
Thank you for that. No further comments. I will move and second it. I will put the recommendation. All in favour will say aye. Aye. Okay, item 5 is confirmation of minutes. Done. Item 6 is the adoption of community resolutions, and the only one there this time is 6.1 strategy and policy. Lyndall, would you like to comment on that?
Thanks, Chairman. Yes, just briefly to highlight 9.2 within those minutes regarding the proposed regional framework for action on climate. Approved resolutions passed. Which we're all very proud of, and would like to thank the group, working group, who put that together. That means that it's come to us at council for formal adoption. Thank you. I'll move those.
I'll second it. Moved and seconded. Any questions for Lyndall?
So we're about to resolve to do that today. I can't remember.
That's it. That's what this is.
That
Yep.
resolution.
Okay.
I will put that recommendation. All in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Against, no. Carried. Item 7 is notification of extraordinary or urgent business. I'm not aware of any this morning. Item 8 is questions. Now, I think we have 2 questions this morning. We've got Robert. Do you have one or not? Oh, it must be Morris, is it?
Make our opportunity.
We have 2 questions, Chair. One from Councillor Rodway and one from Councillor Evans.
Evans, okay.
I'll do mine. So I'll just read it out again, which was sent to everybody on Monday. And the question is, does the council know what the cause of the elevated nitrate in the Gore Bush supply is? And if so, can it take action to remove this health risk to the people of Gore? For example, if the cause is as a result of consented activities, revoke or modify those consents to remove this health hazard.
Bruce, would you like to respond to that, please?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm just responding to my capacity deputising for Hayley today, who's unwell. And I also asked Graham McKenzie, who's our business management team leader, to join us. Graham's deputising for Donna Ferguson, who's on leave today. Just to respond to Councillor Rodway's question, obviously, this is an important matter. We've been treating it accordingly within our organisation, and Graham and the team have been actively investigating the situation. Because it is an active investigation, we are limited in what we can say at this point in time. But please rest assured that we're treating it with the due importance that it requires. We have had senior resource management staff out on the ground yesterday on site and in the surrounding area, and we've also been making contact with other water users in that area and with key industry, etc. So please rest assured it is a focus for our organisation at the moment. In terms of the broader causes, we can't comment at this point in time. We're still investigating that aspect. On the consenting side of things, there's a lot of existing consents in the general locality, and each individual consent, when it comes up for renewal or if it's a new activity, is very closely scrutinised by the consents team. So there's no automatic rollovers or no automatic, you had it before, so you automatically get it again type scenario. It doesn't apply under the Resource Management Act, so we closely look at each application. In a number of those applications and consents that have been processed, there are exclusion zones which recognise the sensitivity of the community water supply. So we're still investigating that at the moment. At a broader macro level around the monitoring of water quality, we're certainly aware that concerns about nitrate issues are not confined to Southland, they're a national concern, and that's certainly something that our consents team factor into their consideration of any applications. So can't be too specific at the moment around the causes, but hopefully that responds to your question. I'm not sure if there's anything you want to add to.
No problem, not. No.
Thanks for that. Robert, you've got a question.
My question is, in the same way that bacterial contaminations have a signature, you can look at them and see where they came from, essentially. Does nitrate have a signature by which you can determine where it originated?
I might throw that to sponsor expert Karen. That's outside of my field of expertise.
Thank you.
So through Chair, so you can do isotope testing and other testing on nitrogen, but generally what is a little bit more accurate is to test for other contaminants that are associated with other sources. So for instance, you tend to see high chloride and other chemicals if it's say from a dairy effluent in comparison to other possible sources. Otherwise you'll see a distinct signature. So there's definitely options around different testing that can be done to help understand the source. I guess the issue is if it's more than one source that might be causing the problem, and then separating out multiple sources, which tends to be what happens in groundwater because everything kind of mixes together. So that is where it gets a little bit more complicated and a little bit harder to be definitive.
And as a supplementary, could I just ask, are you applying those methods to this particular issue?
I would just comment that it's very early in our investigations. Those are tools that we will certainly consider, but it's too early to really say.
For you, Mr. Chairman, sorry if this is a bit of a non-specific answer, but it's actually quite a complex situation, and we need to make sure that we have an appropriate understanding of it. When we get to that point in time, we'll certainly be updating you and the community and stakeholders as well.
I think that's pretty simple. We understand you're in an investigation, and we will get a response eventually, and it'll be based on facts and science. So thank you for that. Paul.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, through you. I made a statement on the email there. It was more probably a statement, but then that was a question. It was with regards to the water quality of the Wakaia River. And what testing do we do up there? Because at the moment it's that time of the year. Maybe it's also a question to our local Southern District Council with regards to farm waste on roads and mud and such like, because it was probably the worst I've seen it in this region anywhere. But also the water quality. Do we test up there for water quality? How many testing stations?
Mr. Chairman, I'll hand over to Karen to respond to the water quality testing aspect, and I can probably respond to the other aspects.
And can I just ask, Chair, that perhaps the computer is facing Karen so that she's visible for the answer?
So we have 3 monitoring sites on the Waikaia River, 3 long-term sites. One is upstream of Piano Flat. The second is at Waikaia, and the third is at Waipanamu Bridge Road. That those 3 sites were tested as part of our long-term monitoring program last week. And we have just got the interim lab results back from the lab, and there was nothing particularly unusual in those results from the sampling that was done last week. We expect to get the full set of lab results though next week. So that is, I guess, the context around the monitoring we do in the catchment. But, you know what's happening.
Thanks very much, Karen. Just to respond to the concern about fouling on the roading network. Obviously, the roading network for that part of the province is administered by the Southern District Council as a road controlling authority. I can tell you from my former territorial authority days that there is a roading policy and roading bylaw that covers this issue, which gives Southern District Council powers to act. And it is somewhat of a perennial issue, particularly during winter time when heavy machinery is moving around, etc. It is challenging, I guess, for the rural sector and sometimes the forestry sector as well to manage heavy machinery moving from private property onto the roading network. But that roading policy and bylaw does give the council powers to act if there's obvious source of that fouling. And it can also be a bit of a traffic hazard at times. I'm sure you've probably experienced this. You get the sort of big dry pods coming out of tractor tread, and then it dries up. It can also create a bit of a traffic hazard as well. So if there's specifics, we can certainly relay those onto the road controlling authority. We can do that in this instance. We have got Ian from our resource management team is up there today. Have a look at the situation on the ground. If there's a specific concern, we'll pass that on. Thank you.
Thanks for that. We'll move to item 9, which is Chairman and Councillors' reports. You've seen the list of the things I have attended. I'm happy to answer any questions on those, but just briefly, a couple of things. A number of us attended the regional tour prior to the LGNZ conference next week. We probably haven't got our LGNZ conference information together. We'll do it at a later meeting, but it was actually great to visit the West Coast, and the further you get away from large centres, the more resilient people are. It was actually a very enjoyable trip, seeing what's happening on the West Coast. We stood on the Alpine fault line at one stage with Franz Josef, and that was a fairly a moment of thinking we know something's coming in the next few years, and some of the effects they'll have on it. Looked at some of their flood infrastructure work that they're doing, and we saw everything from gold mining and repurposing land to a better stage. So that was quite interesting. Just a shout out to our land sustainability team. I had Keith and Jess who came out and assisted. Well, really, I didn't do very much. We put on 50 willow poles, which over time the roots will join up, and it's stopping slips on hillsides, etc. It's a service we've been running for the last couple of years, and apparently the uptake hasn't been that high, but they did a fantastic job, and I think it's a great service. So I just want to put that out there, that those willow poles will have multiple benefits going forward. And it's Wilma's last ordinary meeting, and while we're not saying goodbye to Wilma completely for another month, I thought that it was at the last ordinary meeting it would be timely for me to make a few comments. And I'd just like to thank Wilma for her work, support and leadership across the years, particularly as our Chief Executive for the last 3 years. Wilma's been on council since 2019 and was our General Manager of Strategy, Planning and Engagement prior to becoming the CE. She's been involved in supporting the organisation through some significant change, including the COVID-19 pandemic, the the legislative landscape, we've had a tsunami of change that we've had to respond to from the previous government to this one, and it all takes a lot of work. When the council hired Wilma C in June 2022, we knew we had a strong strategic, she had strong strategic leadership skills and the drive and energy to make a difference, which you have done, Wilma. All of this has been evident in her work, as well as her grasp of environmental matters, her understanding of the workings of central government, her connections and relationships building with stakeholders, and her commitment to our treaty partners, who she has a great relationship with. When we oversaw our staff work programs in the aftermath of COVID, and they were challenging times, but with the help of government funding, we undertook significant climate resilience projects to improve our flood defences in Gore, Mataura, Wyndham and Stead Street. Since then, further funding has been secured for climate resilience work, and we're hopeful more will be announced soon. Also under Wilma's leadership, independent monitoring of Tiwai Point's aluminium smelter has been undertaken, so we actually have a far better understanding of the contamination at that site and an improved monitoring program. Only last year, Wilma was successfully approached central government and asked for a law change when Rule 70 of the RMA created an untenable situation for Southland farmers, which would have meant that 3,500 farmers would have virtually had to have either a consent or, and that, as well as going through the better path of farm plans. And this change was needed to resolve the matter between our water and land plan, which is probably one of the most recent plans to go through the process, with only one or two things to be tidied up. More recently, WIMR has driven improvements in organisational performance and reporting, and has undertaken a reorganisation to ensure we're set up for the future. Our organisation will be more transparent, more enabling for our ratepayer clients. There are many more achievements and situations that WIMR has applied her expertise to and led the organisation through. We had the floods of 2023, a state of emergency at Blue Cliffs, the opening of the Waituna Lagoon using emergency powers, the representation review and the promotion of elections, the completion of Southland LIDAR mapping. This joint project, we're probably one of the first areas in the country to get to the stage we are at the moment. We've had some other interesting things like looking for wallabies, mouse hunts, rock sightings. But I'd particularly like to thank Wilma for her support. She's highly principled, has always wanted to do the best thing for the organisation. Sometimes we've had a bit of a debate about the right way of doing it, but I've always appreciated that your heart is in the right place and you've always tried to protect the organisation and make the right decisions. An enduring approach by Wilma has been a focus on community. It's her way to acknowledge what's happening in the community. Sometimes we see her in Southland Express columns and radio interviews, and to champion community-focused initiatives by this organisation. Wilma is highly regarded by regional sector chairs and CEOs, and I've had a few come up to me on tours and tell me how she's personally supported them. Wilma doesn't actually talk about a lot of the stuff she does. So Wilma has a lot more, she has many other skills and talents which will be able to probably put to greater use once she's not on that very demanding job of a CEO. So we know she's a pretty impressive singer, and I hadn't realised that you've created award designing knitwear. I'm thinking I could give you the wool. So look, thank you, Wilma, for the considerable contribution you and Brett could look forward to a happy retirement. I suspect it might be a semi-retirement. I don't think you're going to just go and weed the garden in the future, but look, we really appreciate what you've done for this organisation, and you always wanted to leave it in a good state. And I know you're working very hard to have an organisation that is positioned for the future and the new challenges that come along. So thank you, Wilma. It's been great to work with you.
Oh my God, sorry.
Is the photo opportunity coming from there, or do you want?
Perfect, thank you. Thank you, and thank you very much, Nicholas. It was rather unexpected today, so I can only say that there's a perfect privilege to work in this organisation, which has got a most excellent leadership team in place and is full of incredibly skilled, dedicated people. And I wish this council all of the very best in the face of what are very interesting times and times of change nationally and regionally, both with an election. So please, can I just say to the councillors, put your nomination forms in, and to the public, if you're watching, that you've got another week if you want to be working in the regional sector. What this council does is absolutely critical to the environmental future of this region, but also to its economy and its society and culture. So this is the regional sector is a great place to work, and I was very pleased to join it in the early 2000s from central government. So thank you very much, and yes, I do have another 6 weeks to go, so I will see you all on other council meetings, but I really appreciate your sentiments, Chair. Thank you very much.
Is there going to be a book, Wilma? I'll ghostwrite it for you. Jacinda's did well.
Not much of a ghost, obviously.
Council, you know, will be a book, actually. What it may be about, though, is another matter.
And look, just reiterating Wilma's words about candidates for the next election. I know there's some uncertainty out there at the moment, and we're having negativity coming out of Wellington and even locally. Look, the work we do is very much future focused. It's about what Southland is going to look like for our grandchildren and great grandchildren. It's important work, and my shout out to people is, if you're thinking about standing for the regional council, put your name in, have a go. Democracy is important. The work we do is important, and we need good quality people to actually take an interest. Now, we have other reports. I saw somebody indicating before, was it again?
I've got a couple of questions. I'll forward the report, Mr. Chairman.
We're not quite there. This is reports from councillors. Peter.
I'd just like to, I was on the regional sector tour too, of course, Nicole, and the observations for the West Coast, what a wonderful area. I can see why those politicians love going over there. Geographically, they're isolated, and that gives that area, I call it the West Coast state of mind. You don't see any road cones over there.
The least road cones
Everyone
ever.
seems to own a digger, and everyone's digging for gold, and they're just getting on with stuff. There's a lot to like about them. And Nicole, to your question, standing, all the regional sector chairs standing on, and councillors standing on that fault line. Someone did make that comment in that group that maybe the government could get their wish if it just took off right there and then. We'd be all gone in one fell swoop. I don't think it was you, Mr. Chairman, but someone did say that. So a wonderful trip and a nice group. Great to see a lot of what I call younger chief executives and chairs, and very engaging groups. So it really was worthwhile.
Lyndall.
Just I might comment on that regional sector tour as well. Two things. They took us in Greymouth to the Pounamu pathway experience that Potini Naita who have established, and it's outstanding. It's a multimedia experience that explains the area and the relationships with assistance from Weta workshops. So you can imagine the visual impact is is remarkable, and it's worth a visit if you are going that way. And certainly highlighted for me a different branch of Ngāi Tahu story that I wasn't aware of. So it's very cool. The other thing I was going to say was that going on those tours is a really good reminder of the big picture work that we are all doing. Yeah, it's really challenging sometimes because we get in our own little zone and we think Southland is unique, which it is. But so are the other areas, right? And so it's a really good reminder, really good discussions about the bigger picture challenges that all the regional sector are facing, the infrastructure challenges, the RM challenges, all of those things. That's the value that I get out of those conversations, is being reminded that we're not in this alone, and we are often fighting similar battles, but we just need to remember that we can do it together. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Lyndall.
Yeah, a question for you, Mr. Chairman. With regard to your time on the West Coast, was there much discussion around managed retreat, particularly in sport?
Friends was the biggest problem.
I guess for the Franz Joseph was probably the most pressing thing. You look at the height of the protection there at the moment, about their ability to have very quick floods, snowmelt, etc. An ideal world that community should be shifted, but if there's no government funding coming through, I can't see it happening. And just small community, small ratepayer base, and it does look like an accident waiting to happen. They're doing what they can. They're extending flood banks to protect a dump site and upgrading things, but there's another area where, as a nation, we probably need some more money into. They're a bit like Southland. You've got small communities. It's quite fascinating. They are very individual, and we fund, are now funding our flood protection network and rivers across the country, whereas they're no adamant, nope, that's their problem, this is our one, which I thought was quite different. But no, it's quite fascinating, and probably the West Coast is the closest to Southland in their attitude. They're very resilient, very self-reliant, and very open. It was an enjoyable time. So there was certainly the protections around Greymouth we did look at, and what they've done, and some of them have stood the test of time. The current chair actually built quite a few of the flood banks himself. So we're all a little bit nervous when the bus driver, who obviously knew where his wheels were, drove up onto the flood bank, and we thought we were just going down again, but no, we drove for quite some time, and we thought, if you go too far, we might have some issues, but no, it was very good. Any other questions or reports? If not, we will move to item 10.1, which is the Chief Executive's quite comprehensive report. Wilma, would you like to comment on the report?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is the report following on from our meeting in June. So the last 6 weeks of the council's operations are covered in this report. Also just like to thank my General Manager, Hayley Fitchett, who was acting Chief Executive last week while I had some leave. And thank you for stepping in. She had quite a bit to do in that week, I think, not least of which were the matters relating to the response to the Gore water situation. So in the report, just want to draw your attention to a few matters. I'm sure that you'll have ones that you have highlighted, but certainly from the science report, I think there's something might have some interest in the fact that this region will be hosting the New Zealand Marine Sciences Society next year, which I think is very apposite given the interests that will flow through to the changes in the New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement and marine aquaculture in our region. Also, I may be interested in following up on the matters relating to the winter grazing flights and to an update maybe since even in the last week, what there might be from the staff to report to you back on that. In terms of the fast track approvals, there is, we've certainly got Contact Energy application of the fast track was introduced at the end of last year, and so there's an update on that, but also there are papers in today's council pack in relation to being able to respond quickly to those fast track applications as they come through to us. In terms of farm plans, there's an update there from the integrated catch from the land sustainability team on their ongoing support in that space while we're waiting the details through the change in government regulations. And there's an update also from the integrated catchment management group on where we're at with those resource consents in relation to gravel build-ups, which I know is a matter of community and council interest. There's also an update on the Kanoa Tranche 2 applications, which we're still just awaiting confirmation from the central government over. And in the biosecurity space, a number of matters in there, not least of which was the incursion of the marine pest Mediterranean fan worm, which we became aware of in the period of the last 6 weeks. So councillors, just communicating to you and happy to answer any questions. We have a full suite of senior staff here to provide you with updates.
Questions for Wilma? I guess, the quite a bit of conversation at the moment we touched on here on warning of floods. It certainly was talked about on the West Coast, and obviously after the Tasman and Nelson situations, the ability to have some sort of early warning to be able to move people is becoming more important. I think probably throughout the country. So we're doing some work on the moisture probes, which I guess tell us what our flood banks are doing, but the other one is probably the radar stuff that can inform us quickly of what's happening. I'm not sure if we're doing any work on that particular space at the moment, but it's certainly topical. Jeremy.
Just one around consent, and I do have a question about the nitrogen thing too. But the Matara over allocation project, I see the report has been done. I was just wondering, is there a timeline when we think that this will be finally sort of put to bed and everybody else move on? They put a date on it. So I see it was about 2019, I think we started this discussion.
Yes, this has been
Mr. Chair, I'll open up and then hand over to Leslie as Consents Manager. Very valid question and very conscious of the importance of this issue. And Lacey and John Rule and others and yourselves have been involved in it and put a power of work into effectively a recalibration process to seek to bring the suite of consents that affected into compliance with the Matara Water Conservation Order. So I'll hand over to Lacey for an update on
through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, put a date on it. I agree. I currently have technical information that's required to resolve the reviews that were sent out as part of the process in 2022. That suite of information is set to be sent through to the decision maker that was appointed by the Regulatory Committee a while back, who is Commissioner Alan Kevitt, and I anticipate those reviews to be completed by the 31st of July 2025. The outstanding replacement applications, there will be a suite of at least 10 going through in the first tranche with a decision for Commissioner Kevitt to make, and from there, all of the replacement applications that we currently have in, whether there's any outstanding information to do with other matters other than water quantity, they will be resolved as per normal process. So by the 31st of July, the numbers are set. So thank you, Karen and team, for finalising that report, and the decisions will be made.
So yes, and just to add briefly to that, I think it's worth also acknowledging that the individual consent holders themselves have been collaborative in this space. It would have been a very challenging process if individuals or collectives had been not willing to engage and not willing to participate in what has been collaborative process. So that's, I think, worth acknowledging, and I'll take that off to the work that Lacey individually has put into this issue.
Thanks, Bruce. Phil?
Yeah, thank you. The report notes that the Slow the Flow project has informed the development of a strawman framework for a catchment approach to floodplain management, and that will inform the development of a floodplain management plan for the Mataura catchment. I'm just curious as to the sort of the timelines for the evolution of that Mataura catchment floodplain management plan, and is that going to involve other stakeholders in a sort of a co-design process, or is it a matter of develop the plan and then take it and see what key stakeholders feel about it?
Through the chair, question, Councillor Morrison, as was provided in an update for the tranche 2 funding proposal to government at the last council meeting, the approach to that project and the potential funding is to take a longer term engagement process to that, to align with the other TAs across the region and involved in that area, and obviously our iwi partners, so and the wider community. The proposal includes a 2 to 3 year initial setup of the project to identify the options. So that optioneering process can be done through a floodplain management plan, or the process to developing that plan. And the intention is certainly to make it a community-wide approach. What exactly that looks like, the Slow the Flow strawman sets up the process and the potential questions and scientific information that would be needed to undertake that work. Actually applying it at place is something that needs to happen through the conversations.
Thank you.
Morris?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chairman. On page 46 about Waituna, talks about securing the necessary land. I don't know what that means. Could you elaborate a bit on that part of the report, please?
I can probably talk to that. You know, the Nature Pro credits thing is being advanced. It's probably dealing with an international agency, so it is early days, but if we can land some of that, it's going to have implications for a lot of our land as well. So it's, if we can leverage a revenue stream that helps us actually increase our biodiversity, that's fantastic. There is, you know, the trust would, there is a plot of land there that if we could secure it, could make a real difference, I believe, with an extensive wetland to Waituna Creek. We haven't landed to that at the moment, but we know the lagoon is still in very bad shape, and we've done a lot of experimental work down there, which that's informed, you know, wetland work around Southland. But we've always been keen, if it was possible, to get something that would make a real difference in that area. There's land in that lower area that I believe could make quite a difference. Some of the others you doing proof of concept, but something the size of the Waituna Creek, which obviously extends into the upper country. A good wetland there would make a difference. Hasn't happened yet, but it's certainly on the radar. And the Webster block, which we're going to talk about shortly, the vision is to plant that back into native, which, you know, it's a long-term project, but again, it's actually it will be lessons for everybody on repurposing the credits that we may come with it as well.
So there are two things. There's one about the credits. I understand, are we looking at buying more land for that purpose, or is there extra land for wetland development or something like that?
I guess to improve the manner of the lagoon, we need to have some significant interventions, I guess. So personally, so as co-chair, I think that's an important priority, and I think the trust actually thinks it is too, but it's the ability to, we're not likely to use public, well, we can't use the Public Works Act to actually acquire land, but if the opportunity came up, I think that could make a real difference and for the community. Peter.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just on this topic, the nature credits is very topical amongst the catchment groups at the moment. I attended a meeting last night, and we're looking for some leaders on this. And with the resources the trust has, can you confirm that the information that you're collecting, the knowledge you're collecting, will be shared out into the wider public so they can forge ahead or riding on their coattails on this sort of stuff, because everyone at a local level is wondering what everything means. We don't quite have the resourcing there, but the trust, I would imagine, would you be able to confirm that that's?
Absolutely. I mean, the work that's happened in Waituna over the last 10 or 15 years, it's been very much about proof of concept and sharing the information so it can ripple out across Southland. So, yeah, certainly we've got a number of partners. You know, we've got DOC, we've got iwi, we've got Southland District, we've got ourselves, and now a community representative. A lot of this work is with you do the detailed scientific work there to prove of concept. In this case, the biodiversity type credits is an emerging real wide thing. It may take a little while to land, but obviously we will be more than happy to share with everybody else. And government, you know, picked up this up too. We know if we can put a value on biodiversity and wetlands, you're halfway there. But people will then look after them or develop them, and we know that increasing wetlands is a key environmental tool that we can use in Southland, and not just Southland, obviously. Yeah. Lyndall.
Yes, yeah, different topic if that's.
Yep.
Wanted to just ask about the National Estuary Monitoring Protocols. I'm wondering, Karen, if how you feel about whether that's a big change coming in those protocols, or whether we're pretty much up to speed and they'll follow our lead rather than us follow theirs, or just, yeah, a general feeling of how that might look for us, given how important our estuary monitoring is, especially new.
Through Chair, so my understanding from the team is that it shouldn't have a major impact to our monitoring program. We are currently planning to do a review of all our state of the environment monitoring networks this year anyway, and as part of that, we'll be making sure everything aligns with national guidance and standards. I think from what I understand though, that there's a bit of tension between what might be useful monitoring, because it's useful to know, a little bit more research focus, as opposed to what's actually useful for resource management. And I think getting the balance right in those protocols is where there's some discussion, and certainly the team are trying to influence that to make sure that the protocols are as practical as possible. So
good luck.
I think the fact that there's been quite a lot of engagement with regional councils on these protocols should mean that we get something quite practical and sensible out of the end.
Great, thank you.
Peter, then Jeremy.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'll just remind the council, just on that question of Councillor Ludlow's, that was one of our last collective actions as a council last term, was to go down and visit New River Estuary, if we remember that. And so the last 3 years it's sort of gone a bit silent. We're not really talking about it. So it might be one of those things that we talk about once every 3 years. I hope not.
Jeremy.
Sorry, Karen, got another question. It's around the nitrates and the gore. Or I should have probably asked it when everybody else was asking questions. Just to clarify, this is a spike. Is that correct? Or has first question is, how often does the water get tested? I take it someone will probably know. And has this been a spike, an unusual, not be normal from the Gore discussion? And around the other nitrates, maybe from a compliance, it's just around the nitrate data from farming. Is that the 540, is that about the usual level, or is it a bit slow this year? Or I just wanted to get a feeling that as we're coming up to July the 31st. Anybody else?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, first I'll just refer to Karen on the nitrate spike aspect.
So I can't comment on the Gore situation, the Gore supply situation specifically. I'll leave these guys to answer that. But we do have a state of the environment monitoring site nearby, within just over a K away. And that site has typically, so I think over the last 10 years, the median nitrate concentration from that bore was between 5 and 6 milligrams per litre. Most drinkable standard is 11.3. I believe on one occasion that bore has spiked above 11.3 in the 20 plus years we've been sampling it. So in terms of the broader monitoring we do across that aquifer, it's certainly not never happened before in terms of getting the occasional level above the drinking water standard. But in terms of the Gore investigation, I will leave answer that one.
Thank you very much, Karen. To you, Mr. Chairman, I really would prefer not to comment further on the specifics of the investigation for the reason I outlined previously. We'll certainly keep you informed or aware of the interest in this matter. Just with regard to synthetic nitrogen generally, I guess that is an issue that has been flagged as a concern through this current situation and other situations around the country.
I guess through you, Mr. Chair, I can't honestly comment on the numbers coming in, but I understand that is reasonably typical at this stage. As to what the interpretation of that information is, I think it's too early. We're still receiving data and we'll be going through the process.
Okay. That sounds actually just a follow-up question for Karen. So we have a site there, that data on our site will be public. We can go in and look. I suppose I'm asking, is there a spike in that data? How often we test our own?
Yeah, so through Chair, so we monitor our state of the environment monitoring boards 4 times a year, every quarter. So June is typically within the most recent sampling round, and that data is publicly available. As I understand, it's on the RAWA website, but I think it only gets uploaded about every year. So it gets uploaded in batches rather than continuously uploaded to their website.
Okay.
But it certainly is, as I understand it, publicly available.
Thanks. John.
Thank you. Yeah, Jeremy asked part of the question I was, but also I guess is 4 times a year enough? You know, when we're seeing technology where we can see live probes that are pretty accurate, is there an opportunity to, are we doing enough monitoring in this spot checking? Is that actually ticking all the boxes for getting a real picture of what's going on, depending on flushes and such?
So through Chair, we're following, I guess, national protocols around groundwater monitoring, and typically groundwater quality doesn't sort of change dramatically in response to events in the same way, for instance, rivers might do. But that's kind of typical. Sometimes you get atypical behaviour. In terms of the frequency of monitoring, as I mentioned, we're doing a fairly comprehensive review of all our long-term monitoring networks this year, and that will be one of the factors that we're looking at through that. But currently we're following national guidance around these types of monitoring programs, which are typically done quarterly.
Any further questions on Wilmer's report?
No recommendations, Mr. Chairman.
Seconded by Rundle. All in favour will say aye. Right, we'll move to 10.2, Environment South and submissions on RMA national direction.
Reasonable substantial number of papers given the amount of national directions.
So would you like to comment on the quite comprehensive report?
Certainly, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just set the scene and provide a bit of context. And then I'll have Sharon talk a little bit about the recommendations report. So the reason why we've invested so much energy in this area, national direction is a hugely important piece of work that helps define exactly what regional councils and territorial authorities do, particularly in the sense that it provides the direction for regional policy statements, regional planning documents such as the water and land plan and the coastal plan moving forward. A lot of that direction needs to be, all that direction needs to be consistent with the national policy statements and national environmental standards. So this national direction, as it's changing, bringing forward the incoming governments, changes they want to make to the environment and how the regulations work, and provide a more enabling approach for the economy. So primarily our reason to be invested in this space is to understand exactly what's happening, what the impacts of that are on Southland, and what the impacts are also on the organisation, as a lot of our work programs are defined by the requirements of the national direction. So we're making sure that effectively moving forward, our regulations need to be consistent with the national direction, and a lot of the comments in the submission have been checked alongside with other regions that are going through the same process, and also to Uruhika, that has been coordinating a regional sector response to the national direction as well. So I'll hand over to Shana to talk through some more specific points that are in our submissions.
So the consultation has been structured around 3 packages, as noted in the report. Package 1 relating to infrastructure and development, package 2 relating to primary sector, and package 3 primarily deals with the proposals relating to freshwater management. Given the size of the submissions, I used to go through each package with highlighting the key proposals and the key submissions, if that is okay. And I would take the report as read. And so for package 1, infrastructure and development, the package includes proposals for 4 new national direction instruments and amendments to 4 existing instruments, aimed at making it easier for councils to plan and deliver infrastructure. And in the report, we have also provided a list of those national directions being affected. And in our submissions, we have, for efficiency, we tried to focus on the national directions that have more significant impact on our region. These are the NPS for infrastructure and the NPS for renewable electricity generation, and the national policy statement relating to natural hazards. So a key aspect of those proposals involves enabling development and maintenance of infrastructure, a wide range of infrastructure, including renewable electricity generation activities. And for natural hazards, the intention is to develop a national framework that allows regional councils to incorporate risk assessment, natural hazard risk assessment into their decision making.
I've got John, followed by Peter, followed by myself.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just probably what stood out to me when I looked through all the packages is the current theme of less consent for monitoring. And I guess I'm an outcomes-based person, that's fine, but now when we're looking at rates, challenges and user pay models by this government, how do we position ourselves to be able to recover those costs is my biggest concern looking at there's no consents in there, who's going to pay for the monitoring?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Great question. Effectively, we anticipate to see some of that detail come through with the phase 3 reform. So that'll be the replacement legislation that sits above the national direction documents. At the moment, we've got a Resource Management Act. There's a signalling that that's going to disappear and be replaced by 2 new acts, which will bring in that change to the consenting and monitoring regime. And through that legislation, there should be tools outlined exactly what responsibilities sit with which different local government agency, and exactly what sort of mechanisms there are for charging and regulating costs, and whether that user pays or everybody pays approach, how that is reconciled. So effectively, we haven't got too many answers at this stage, but we need to wait and see until that phase 3 legislation pops out as part of that new bill, or those new bills, just to see the mechanics of how that's going to work in practice.
Okay. As usual, thank you.
Peter?
Just page 64 under the standards for commercial forestry, just noted at the bottom, looking at Douglas Fir, last paragraph, the existing wilding calculator, which is a requirement for afforestation without resource consent, and is currently under review by MPI. It says at the end, has not been effective in the southern context. Are you indicating that a resource consent for Douglas Fir would be a good step forward?
Yes, through you, Chair. Effectively, resource consents are one tool, but from what we're seeing is, prevention is better than cure, and whether it's a species aspect, I think there's probably a range of tools that could be implemented to manage the wilding risk, not only in Southland, but across the rest of South Island. I see Melba's got problems, and Kennedy's got problems, and Otago's got problems. So effectively, resource consent is one tool in the toolbox, but we see a strengthening of the calculation requirements to make it more difficult to plant those species would be beneficial.
I think it's very good. Good work with that.
Myself, then Paul, then Morris. Look, this national direction is supposed to be the pillars that these acts are going to sit on. I've still got some concerns about hierarchy, the fact that the current ones that they don't mesh well. There's a few areas like plantation forestry one. I think we need to be pushing for some regional flavour, because I can understand we want to consistent direction, but if the architects of the reform are clear in their direction, there should be able to be regional flavour. So, like Douglas Fir issues may not be an issue in some other parts of the country, but, and at the moment there's still no requirements that I can see for plantation developers to actually put in water storage, buffers. There's a whole lot of things. If you look around the world at the moment, that trees are great for sequestering carbon, but they burn pretty well. And if we don't have some mitigations in there, we've seen it happen before, that with warmer summers and what's happening every night on the news, we need to have a framework that actually protects us. Paul.
Thank you, Chair. Just not much, just the fact that it's a draft, and on maybe a wee bit of a Morris typo here, page 69 and 110, missing the word draft. No, chocolate fishes this way.
And page 57, paragraph 15 also needs a look.
Thank you.
It's been a huge task to pull together the breadth of work on this in a short time frame to make sure there's a consistent alignment. So there is certainly a number of typos already been identified by councillors in the report, and we're working to tidy that up and make sure it's polished before the end of the week.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you.
Morris.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I did, just to let everybody know, I sent an email through to Shana and Marcus about some of those and rather than going through the whole thing at this meeting, I thought might be a little bit tedious, so.
I saw you twitching over there, Morris.
There were a couple of things. I was very impressed by the submission on marine stuff. It was a little bit different in tone to the rest of it. The author was quite passionate about it. I thought that was very appropriate, but maybe in terms of a submission to the government that might need to be altered a wee bit. I've mentioned that, but I was impressed. I think all the issues that were covered in that particular part of the submission were very good. A couple of other things that were the bit about wetlands. This is on page 120. I wondered about the definition. It's still a problem with defining what a wetland is on a pasture with a few rushes in it. I know we've tried to address that at our water plan, but I'm not sure if the national stuff is actually making much progress. I think it's really important to be able to identify what is a wetland and what isn't a wetland. I know that's really hard, but in terms of being able to create new wetlands, being able to enhance an existing wetland is really important to be able to do that without being held up. At the moment, I understand that if a wetland has got some wetland species in it, you can't enhance it because you're going to be damaging those species, and that's a problem. I'm not sure how you get around that, but I know you've addressed it here, so it's probably a work in progress. But that's something I thought I'd mention, Mr. Chairman. And the only other one there is about on page to do with nitrate reporting, page 123. The report says that the requirement for the cap is essential, which is good, it must be retained. And synthetic fertiliser use alone doesn't reflect the total nitrogen load. As the cap it says here, it does not include nitrogen contributions from dairy effluent. But dairy effluent is the nitrogen in dairy effluent has come from the original application of fertiliser on the farm. So the dairy effluent doesn't add to the load because it's part of what has been put on initially. But what does add to the load is other things like clover, for example, can add a lot of nitrogen, and also supplements such as PKE. I know those don't have a lot of nitrogen in them, only about 2% compared to, say, about 45% for urea. But when you add a lot of that, then it has to be, it should be taken into account. So I agree the cap should be there, but it shouldn't, and you've attempted to do that here, it should recognise other inputs as well. And fundamentally, I don't think caps are very useful. I think what you've got to measure is the output. Currently, that can only be done using overseer, but there are other things being developed. So it's a difficult issue, but I wonder if you could have a look at that and maybe talk about other things such as supplements which are added, and clover. If you've got 40% of your pasture in clover, that's adding about 150 kilograms per year, so that's a lot. And we know we're talking about that issue at Gore at the moment, and we know that it's a national issue, so this is a really important thing, and I think we should make a strong statement in there about that, about the need to lower nitrogen levels overall. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Lovely. Peter, then myself. Peter.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. I just talked about rebalancing of freshwater management through multiple objectives, moving away from that hierarchy of Te Mano Te Wai. I know this council hasn't really talked about that, but the previous council, we talked about that quite a lot, and I like your position you've taken on that, so I fully support that. And just my experience over the years is that it's had to be in place for the hierarchy because it doesn't fall down to those other objectives, because economics just takes over everything. So you have to steer towards that hierarchy for the what you call, I call the prestige of the resource. So I think that's a real strong point that we have to rally around. If that's not there, it doesn't fall to social and community matters and all the others. It just goes straight to economics, and that becomes the default hierarchy. Whether we say it doesn't or not, previous experience tells us it does clearly. So just want to make that point. Well done.
Thanks, Peter. And we're talking about nitrogen. We have a lot of other users of nitrogen who are not captured by the 190Ks, and I think we've got other activities that are contributors that we can work that into there as well. And I'd just like to thank the staff for this. It's a huge amount of work to actually react to the tsunami of stuff coming through in very short times. And I think sometimes I think we're too polite. I've always found when we're talking to select committees or government, we need to be reasonably passionate and blunt to get a message across. We were on there with Marcus and I a couple of weeks ago, and I rewrote some of it and made it a bit more pointed while we were waiting to get online. But we seem to be getting picked up a bit on that, and so it's an opportunity to, whether they'll listen or not, I don't know, but working behind it is what underpins their ability to actually speak to some of this stuff. Lyndall.
Thanks. I just wanted to go back to page 56 and the importance of spatial planning paragraph. So I've highlighted just nearly all of them because they're all really important. So firstly, thanks for understanding what councillors had said to you at workshops and things, and getting that into the document. But like Chairman Morrill, actually, I'd be pretty forthright in those paragraphs, because actually the relationships and between local government authorities, but also some of those things around having regard to and considering, that's the terminology is vague, as you point out. So it completely endorse what you've got there, and you can find more pointed words. I'd be up for that. Thank you.
John, were you indicating?
Yeah, sorry, to add to my original question, thank you very much. Just looking at my notes that I made when reading through this. So probably back to support Morris on the wetland thing. Let's look at this as an opportunity, please, to bring some clarity and ease. And I guess we got boxed into a corner for the previous national direction. And those rules were put in place to protect, but they've actually inhibited growth on wetlands. And I guess around nitrogen, I suppose, absolutely outputs. The 190 rule wasn't entirely popular, but has been accepted amongst the industry, is my feeling when I talk to peers. But not surprised that this has been challenged. And to the chair's comment that it's very sector-based, example is I could not graze a paddock in the centre of my farm. I could pile as much nitrogen on as I want, as long as I don't have a black and white animal touch that paddock. It's pretty ridiculous. But I sort of wrote a note here that I got the feeling that potentially things like SNOs might fall back on us rather than being removed from the TA. Is that correct? Is there sort of a bit of some responsibility being taken off TAs, put to regional councils? And does that change our ability to protect wetlands, to maybe change how we can approach how we protect wetlands rather than looking at the rules that are holding up wetland development?
Yeah, great question, through you, Chairman. That's certainly an indication of the phase 3 reforms that is part of that bigger package again of who gets which slice of the pie to regulate and manage. That's what the early indication is that potentially some of that biodiversity piece may be coming back towards regional council function. Effectively, the current RMA tries to incorporate a integrated management approach, so biodiversity and water quality should be managed in an integrated way. So the regional policy statement should direct regional councils and TAs to manage that in a cohesive and coherent way that they seamlessly join, but in practice that probably hasn't happened as good as it could be. And this is probably an opportunity to strengthen that management approach and bring them close together so that you look at all of those aspects associated with grazing, biodiversity, water quality, living soils, and all of those sort of different aspects around different land uses too, not just farming, but across other aspects as well, for urban development and these things.
Oh, that's quite handy, wouldn't it?
Any further questions? If not, would somebody like to?
Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to recommend or put the recommendation. I wonder though, perhaps we could add to the end of it, something about the comments that councillors have made.
Some clarification from Marcus, is there a date by which you want this to go out the door that councillors could, in the recommendation, provide you directly with any additional feedback?
End of July.
Sunday, so end of this week. Submission is due on Sunday this week. So
So any further, so comments from today, but any other further observations by tomorrow?
thanks.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Yes, okay, so I'm happy to move that, Mr. Chairman.
I'll second it.
We've been seconded. I'll put the recommendation. All in favour will say aye. Aye. So I can move to 10.3, which is retrospective approval of Environment South submissions. Neville.
Just thank the staff for recognising our feelings and intent and regulatory standards.
Yes.
Well, response is much stronger than the original one. Still kept at a high level, but we've used the right language, I believe. That's quite impressive.
Well, it's all online because we can't justify flying to Wellington for 10 minutes. And there's always technical difficulties, and that I thought we did as well as we could. Marcus suddenly had to be filmed more at the last moment, but I think he handled it pretty well. So,
I'll move the recommendation, Mr. Chairman.
moved by Morris, seconded for that. Neville, into the discussion. I will put the recommendation. All in favour will say aye.
I would also, council, that you've been very successful in working with staff on recommendations around submissions to get in front of select committees as often as we have. And I'd just like to observe it's not every council ends up. This council has been very successful in being asked by the select committee to go and speak to a variety of pieces of regulation. And I think that that's because, you know, the work that's been done here to be very clear about your position, and you work very well with staff for that. So thank you. And I was pleased to see that we were asked to comment on the regulatory services stuff as well. So thank you.
Okay, 10.4, request for approval of delegations fast track approvals Act 2024. Bruce, would you like to comment on this item?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Conscious of time, I'll take the report as read, but just a very quick overview. Obviously, the Fast Track Approval Act was enacted in late 2024. This report basically seeks to ensure that we have appropriate delegations for the full range of functions under the Act. And as you can see from the appendix there are quite a few of them. There's 30 odd different roles that we have, even though Environment Southland is not the decision maker with respect to these applications. Just to explain the green highlighting that's in the schedule of proposed delegations. As is said there in the note at the top of the page, the purpose of that green highlighting was just to flag those key elements where Environment Southland's important input is really crucial. It was discussed at the regulatory committee that there was a strong desire for councillors to still have visibility around the responses that we're providing on these fast track projects. Obviously noting the nature and scale and importance for the region. So there's no intention to deviate from that. As per the governance structure that's outlined in the previous appendix, the intention is the staff will work through a draft position. It would then be come through to our internal team, myself and Karen and Marcus and Liz, to check for consistency with their strategic documents, and then will be circulated to the councillors for feedback. Any changes made from there, and then the appropriate delegated officer, which for the important stuff would be the chief executive and the GM of strategy and regulation, could then approve the response, go to the to the EPA. So there's no intention to deviate from that desired response from the councillors to have good visibility around the responses that we're putting forward on these projects. But it is important that we have the appropriate delegations to respond. Some of them are more of an administrative nature, but we have tight time frames around this, so it's really embedding those delegations. The other element of this is there is no committee of council that currently has oversight of fast track approval act processes. So the second part of the recommendation seeks that the regulatory committee have that included in the terms of reference. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thanks. Bruce, Lyndall.
Thanks. Yes, second recommendation is really important. Thank you. Just, I'm aware that you've got a really limited time to respond to these. So, that's my question is, are you confident? I mean, thank you firstly for doing your best to include the councillors in that process as we desired. But I'm really concerned that might slow you down a little bit. So are you comfortable that getting that feedback from councillors in the time pressure that you've got will work for you?
Through Mr. Chairman, that is a good question, and liaising with some of the larger councils like Auckland and Wellington. Auckland has 28, I think it is, fast track projects at the moment that they're dealing with, and for that reason, for the administrative part of it, some of the larger councils aren't including that step where they consult with councils, they're informing them rather than resolving them on the draft inputs. I think we can make it work, we make it work today, but it might have to be reasonably brief opportunity. There is an important part of this which is coming through nationally on fast track processes is a lot of it needs to sort of be front loaded with the discussions with the applicant early on in the piece, so issues are narrowed and quite clear earlier on, just effectively just run at a time. So I think we can make that arrangement work, albeit sometimes it might have to be via email or something like that, to make sure that you have an opportunity for visibility and feedback rather than through specific meetings as such.
Thanks.
I'll move both recommendations, Chairman.
Moved by Neville, seconded by Jeremy. All in favour say aye.
Aye.
Right, we'll move to 10.5, which is the Charter of Understanding. No, to retire.
This is the background material that was circulated on Monday. It's the same except some page numbers have been added on. Those of you that may not have seen it. It's just a one-pager.
Would you like to comment on the report, Rachel?
Thank you, Chair. So this report is seeking council approval of the updated Charter of Understanding. And you'll recall that there has been a process being undertaken over the last few months. It's been a process in the end that's been a refresh, not a rewrite of the document per se. And while the document might look a little different, the central commitments remain as they've always been. We had a hui at the Murihiku Marae back in March, where you got an update on how the other councils, or the process rather, and how other councils were feeding in. We're in the process at the moment where the documents come back to all councils for approval. So ourselves and Otago Regional Council are meeting today. And then ICC, I think, is next on the 29th, and different councils have got different dates being slotted in. So very happy to go through the table if that would be helpful, or to take questions, whichever approach you'd like, for discussion around the updated charter.
Well, perhaps run through the table, it won't take long, and then we'll go to questions.
So as set out on the table, the general changes are really a greater use of Te Reo. Some of the duplication that was in the document has been removed, and the document has been reordered slightly from pre-flow. And obviously there were some legislative references that were a wee bit out of date, so they've been updated and overall design refreshed a little bit. In terms of purpose, that remains as it's always has been, to develop a relationship of mutual benefit between the parties, but that has had some expanded wording around the enduring, authentic and mana enhancement aspects of the relationships. In terms of signatories, remains as 7 councils and 4 Manama. There's a little bit more clarity on process for new parties wishing to join. In terms of the governance components, the existing Te Ruku Tau structure is retained, and something that is a little bit different to the previous charter is that there is a terms of reference that will sit outside the charter and will be generated in the first instance post-elections, and that will set out the membership scope, meeting frequency and locations, and some of those operational matters such as the secretariat function. So that will be a separate document that can be updated as needed. Obviously post-elections there will be quite a process around induction, so the Te Ruku Tau PO group, which is the management level that supports Te Ruku Tau, is in discussions about how we might support that induction process. So that probably flows into the next component, operational. So the role of that PO group has been set out because it wasn't outlined in the previous charter. References to Matawaka removed due to other engagement mechanisms being used rather than Te Ruku Tau. In terms of Te Tiriti, the previous charter had quite a lengthy explanation of some of the principles that's been shortened up, and a focus on the articles taken. Turning the page to legislative context, so the key acts obviously remain as they are for the time being, but the document's been expanded to refer to a broader range of legislation, including some of the more recent pieces of legislation like the Fast Track Approvals Act, and just noting that there are reforms obviously underway. In terms of funding, the previous charter set out dollar values for the 2015-16 year, and the same funding breakdown has been included, but rather than put the figures in which get outdated, the funding breakdown set out. Important to note that there is a separate piece of work that has been commenced, which is a review of the funding model, and that will be picked up and fed into the 2027 long-term plan. So further discussion to come on that one. In terms of the review period, that's the final component, and it stays exactly the same, at least once every 5 years, noting that the process tends to extend out for a wee bit longer than that.
Thanks, Rachel. Questions, comments? I've got Phil, Lyndall. Phil.
Yeah, thank you. I just probably wish to observe that I think it's a positive thing that the purpose of that has been updated to reflect that enduring, authentic and mana enhancing relationships. And I think perhaps that is something important to flag, because that is more than just a relationship of mutual benefit. Mana enhancing and enduring and authentic, I think that perhaps signals a greater obligation on this council to pay attention to that relationship and to invest in fostering that relationship in additional, perhaps deeper ways over time. So I just want to flag that I think that is perhaps a subtle but important update, and I think it's a very positive move.
Thanks, Phil. Lyndall.
Thanks, yes, I agree with that. And just wanted to remind ourselves, I suppose, that this is about the broader Te Ruku Tau conversation, not just our specific relationship with Tammy in particular, but any others. And it's just that broader overarching charter for that group across councils. And it's a really important understanding in charter, and I think the updates are relevant now, but there's some work to do, as you say, Rachel, so it's good to hear that there's some other sidebar conversations happening that will feed into that later, because it's super important, as Councillor Morrison says. So yeah, just a reminder that it's that overall governance and oversight group that this is about. Thanks.
Morris.
Mr. Chairman, I have a little, I know this is probably not going to change it much. I support the things generally, as Lyndall and Councillor Morrison have mentioned. I do want to raise an issue, and these are set out on paragraphs 4.2.6 to 4.2.8 in relation to resource consents. 4.2.6 says, with regard to consultation of resource consents, the councils will ensure that consent applicants provide sufficient information, which is fair enough. I think that's good. Then we look down to the bottom of 4.2.8, paragraph E, or point E, and currently it says endeavour to respond to consultation processes in a timely manner. I wonder if that could be, maybe we need to talk to Te Ao Marama about that as part of this process. I mean, we can approve this, but then talk to them about that, because I'm aware that there are issues with the long time that it sometimes takes for iwi to respond to resource consents. And this is very frustrating for consents applicants. And I do think that we need to address this issue and perhaps tighten it up by saying, rather than endeavour to, say, respond to consultation processes in a timely manner. Now, I don't think we should, while I think that would improve things, there might be, it should be something that we talk to Te Ao Marama about to try and resolve that issue, so that, you know, the time frame. I know Department of Conservation sometimes take a while as well, and Fish and Game may be guilty of that at times in the past as well. But when people that need to be consulted with for resource consents, you know, they do have a responsibility, in my view, to respond in a timely manner, just like we do. The council is legislated to respond within a certain time, and I think that the other people, including iwi, should as well. So I'm not sure how to deal with that. Maybe we should approve this now, but note that that is something that we need to address and to try and get an improvement on, Mr. Chairman.
No, thanks, Uncle. That's a good point. And well, while it's once every 5 years, I think obviously with LTPs coming up, there is an opportunity. But I believe our relationship with Te Marama is strong and robust, and that conversation could be held quite soon. And if they need more support in some way to for the timing manner, that we may we could have a discussion which may end up putting a time frame in place that so that we can actually comply with the expectations of the public and the government, that these consent processes are they don't take a long time, and they don't have to have a cost of waiting. Jeremy.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chair, and I fully support Councillor Rodway's just said. I certainly support the document, and I would really recommend and encourage that we do have a set some time in the near future, if not in the induction of the new council, to sit down with Tammy, and this is obviously setting the groundwork to how we work in management, and I think this is a hugely important document, and our partnership with iwi, probably more so maybe than the TA's, the regional sector, when we're regulating on resources, and that we have a more, I feel, probably more day-to-day working relationships with iwi, so it even becomes more focus on this to how we start or how we work together. And so I'd certainly recommend in the future that we do sit down with Te Marama or Ngāi Tahu, same, and get a very good, clear understanding. And if there are things that we can bring up to enhance the relationship, to make they want to hear, no doubt they'll want to know the feedback, and we want to hear from them too. So how we can enhance and move forward and work well within the whole community too. So yeah, I'm happy to move the recommendation. It's what's needed.
Thanks, Jeremy.
I'll speak against that recommendation from Councillor Rodway. I think it would be a mistake to try and alter the wording of the document at this stage, particularly in that area where I'm aware that Tammy and various groups that we deal with are well aware of the reasons for wanting decisions to be made in a timely manner. They have their own way of dealing with these things, and we're trying to impose, if you like, the European way on the way that things are done, which is not going to be particularly acceptable. They know what they need to do, but they also know that they're short of resources, and they're not only perhaps to ask for further support. But I would be quite opposed to changing that wording at the moment. I believe that it's self-explanatory at the present time.
Mr. Chair, perhaps a suggestion to this. I understand the points that you're making about the timely fashion. I think that it would be fair to say that Te Marama, who, you know, notwithstanding the fact that yes, we have a very close relationship, they work with us closely on consents, does have a responsibility to work with a significant number of other councils and others across the border in Otago. They have 8 staff. So the issues that you raise are issues that should be a matter of conversation between us and Te Marama, both at the PO level in terms of how to support them, but also I think this is an agenda item for the Rokotaia meeting itself. There are implications for that because this is how Te Marama is funded in order to actually be able to respond. And so I think there's a more complex conversation to be had about expectations in relation to that. And also I suggest, you know, once we've actually seen the detail of what might be in RMA 3 in terms of consenting process, as well as what the impact on Te Marama might be for that, I don't know. So can I suggest that the way that this is presented at the moment is not a diversion from the previous way that this has been constructed, but that if you were to put the recommendations as they are, but with also a recommendation that discussion around enabling Te Marama to be more timely, that is a topic of conversation at the Rokotaia.
Thank you.
Could I ask, Chairman, Jeremy, were you saying you supported what Morris was putting forward, or you were supporting the recommendations which were in the documents?
I'm happy to support the recommendation of the documents. Morris is bringing up good points about a longer discussion that needs to be happened in the future.
It's a valid
through to Roper. I really support that too. This is about moving forward and trying to get for the betterment of the community and around the consenting and bits and pieces. Be more efficient. So, and also the funding is critical to that, to build the capacity up for them to be involved. So. But we need to know that, and that's sitting around the table.
I'll second it.
So I'm recommending.
Moved and seconded, but Peter, you have a comment?
Yeah, just a final comment. I'll just remind the council that within the recommendations of the regional forum, you'll correct me, Phil, if I'm wrong, there was a recommendation for capacity building in this context, wasn't there?
And correct, but in not just in this area, but a more broader capacity building to enable integrated catchment management to emerge. So capacity building at a bunch of different levels.
And this is also what a lot of people possibly realise is that the Murahiku boundary includes Clutha and Queenstown, and therefore the Otago Regional Council. So while the 4 iwi are based in South, and their scope is a bit higher than that, and that's one of the reasons they do have some capacity issues, because that's a big area of 8 staff. But look, it's been moved and seconded. I will put the motion. All in favour say aye. Aye. Right, we'll move to 10.6. is aquaculture, settlement area, coastal plan update. Liz, would you like to comment on the report?
Yeah, so at the end of last year, the Minister for Oceans and Fisheries had gazetted some aquaculture settlement areas in Southland. A requirement under the Resource Management Act is that we reflect those areas in the coastal plan and make those changes as soon as possible without a formal process. However, because our delegations manual hasn't yet reflected the insertion of the section in the RMA that requires that bring this to you as council for that decision to be made. It's a relatively administrative change. It doesn't affect any of the roles at this stage.
I'll move it.
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion on the resolution? All in favour say aye. Aye. Well, that was very efficient, that was.
Thank you.
Okay, we move to 10.7, which is Webster Block land transfer report. July 2025.
Just perhaps have a break. For 5 minutes max.
Okay, we might have a 5-minute break where we just organise the people to stretch their legs. But
And can we, review the streets?
Oh, low blow, fun.
Faster than anyone.
Long legs. Better kick you in the shins.
Right. Welcome back after that rather long 5 minutes, but we will now proceed with 2.7 Webster Block land transfer report. And Patrick, would you like to comment on this?
Thank you. So I've got some remarks to introduce the paper, and we are also proposing some amendments to the recommendations. So the first part of the paper proposes the sale of the Webster Block to the Whakamana Te Waituna Trust, and this will ensure that the Webster Block is maintained and developed in accordance with the Freshwater Covenant, and that any future revenues from a nature credit scheme continue to support the restoration and maintenance activities in the Waituna catchment. The rest of the paper describes the transactional requirements to complete the sale of the property and the transfer of the title at a nominal value of $1. Several items for noting in terms of the transactions. First of all, the land has been revalued after considering the restrictive covenant that has been applied to the land, and its value has decreased from 650k to 250k, with the valuation report attached. Based on the revaluation of the asset on the council balance sheet, based on the revaluation of the asset on the council balance sheet has been written down, and a charge of 400k has been taken against our financial year 2024-2025 statement of comprehensive income and expenditure. If the recommendations in this paper are agreed to, a further charge of 250k will be taken against our financial year 2025-26 statement of comprehensive income and expenditure as part of selling the land to the trust at nominal value. We've sought expert accountancy and legal advice, and we have concluded that there are no GST or gifting implications associated with completing the sale and transfer at a nominal value. So if I can just touch on the recommendations, please note that following on from further discussion with interested parties, we are now proposing to amend the right of first refusal recommendation in the paper. We are proposing that recommendation 2 is amended to include either a protection method incorporated into the deed or a right of first refusal. If those wording changes are agreed to, then there are some necessary minor wording changes to recommendations 4 and 5. So when you are ready for me to, I can read out the revised recommendations.
Thanks for that, Patrick. Will, would you like to comment on?
Certainly. So thank you very much for the paper, and thank you to the chair and the trust for providing feedback from the trust perspective on the best way to reflect the trust deed in the nature of protecting the public interest. The proposed changes to the recommendation, which have been circulated, as Patrick has outlined, state a preferred method to secure protection of the land at the time of its transfer, just to ensure that the future benefit for the community is there. There is wind-up clauses in the Whakamana Te Waituna trust deed, which reflect a desire for wherever, should that happen, for any reason, that the assets of the trust would go to a similar trust, that it would have charitable status and similar purposes, and if such a trust at such a time could not be found, then to another charitable trust. The council just wants to be clear that it is less concerned with those wind-up issues. The issue would be the wind-up agreement of whatever other entity the assets then went to ensure that continuity. And so the original proposal was specifically the first right of refusal should that not, should not be satisfactory, but we think that that can be dealt with in a way that really does reflect the intent of the deed, and the way that the deed may be framed. So we'd like to discuss that with the trust when we make them the offer of property as the preferred option for dealing with the matter, and that would deal with the way that the deed is actually structured in relation to its wind-up clauses. The council would be agreeing, however, that should that be impossible to actually do, because we can't speak for the trust ahead of a trust conversation, then the council may still want to continue to have its first right of refusal, should that not be something we can settle on at the time of sale and purchase. However, I think you have some reasonable sense that that would be, Chair, a matter that we could actually quite straightforwardly discuss.
Yes, I think that's, the Waituna Trust is moving into a new stage where we now have a trust that can own assets, and this is a very long-term project, and other people have had probably experience with trusts. If your deed is not clear, years down the track, you can get the reverse outcomes. And that's all we're trying to do is public money's gone into the. And all we need to do is, in the unlikely event of a wind up, that continues in that charitable status. So I think we've had a few discussions, and we'll obviously take that back to the trust just to see if we get clarity, because this is important work. This is quite an ambitious project to actually return this land to probably a combination of native plantings, wetlands, etc., and the learnings from this and potential nature credits that we're working on after the benefit of the Southland. So that a lot of what the trust has been doing in recent years, it's leading edge, and it has benefits for the whole community. So I'm certainly happy to support the amended recommendations, and happy to take it back to the trusts. The last thing we want to do is to affect the trust and confidence we've built up over the years. Very diverse group of people. We have iwi, we have DOC, we have Southland District, we have ourselves, we have Fonterra. But working together for a common goal has actually been quite inspiring and quite impressive. And working in it's an environment with a Ramsar site, and we have some real water quality issues. We have a community that are also interested, and I believe this vehicle where you can bring a community together and work for a common aim is laudable, and I hope it will continue long after I'm not part of that trust. But any other comments?
Yeah. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I totally support what you're saying, and I see this as not only for the wider community, but for this council too. When we get into the throes of leading on our leased land, we're going to have a early adopter, we're going to have information collected, but what we're talking about in this nature credit space, there's a lot of stuff swirling around the atmosphere, and everyone's going off in different directions, but I see the trust as actually having the resources to push it forward in a real solid way that we can get around behind. There's a lot of discussion around this, so I think it's some pretty exciting times to see how they can lead the province around this sort of new way of doing things. So totally support what you're saying.
Thank you, Peter. Lyndall.
Thanks, Chairman. Yeah, I agree. And I certainly support the reworded recommendations. Can't stress enough how important it is to have intentions clearly articulated in trust deeds and documents, because anything that's left open to interpretation usually is reinterpreted. So anything that makes it really clear about process or procedure or expectation works for me. So I absolutely endorse the reworded recommendations.
Any further comments? If not,
I'll move it, Chairman.
Moved by Lyndall.
All of those recommendations.
Seconded by Morris. So that is the amended recommendations. No further comments. I will put the recommendation. All in favour will say aye.
Aye. Thank you, councillors, and thank you. It's been a long time in the making, and we're very pleased to be able to have the land being managed together for the benefit of the ecosystem.
The world. On 10.8, councillor's diary update for July.
A couple of amendments from me. And cancel my application for leave from the 10th to the 21st. We'll substitute leave on the 13th and 14th of August. Now noting that the 13th is actually a regulatory committee meeting which I'm the chair of, and will require a substitute.
Is anybody? Yes, we have Neville, I'll have that noted down. Any further requests for leave or meetings that aren't on the list? Phil?
Yeah, there's a series of meetings. Luckily, fortunately or happily today, we accepted the recommendation from Strategy and Policy Committee to endorse the framework for action, but the other councils in Te Ao Marama are yet to consider that, and we'll be doing so in the next 2 weeks. And I've undertaken to go and speak to each of those council meetings and the TAMI board meeting to promote or support the consideration of that framework for action. So just wondering if those 4 activities might be added on the dates that I've identified. And I can forward those to Jan. So that's with the TAMI board, ICC, STC, and a Gore District Council meeting between now and
August. Will be fine. Your appropriate dates. Anything?
We're currently setting up meetings where you're speaking, council staff will be speaking with the each of the TAs about river management flood. And I'm anticipating that some of the councillors will attend those in support with staff. So they've just been set up in the next couple of weeks. So they will be added into the agenda. There's been some changes to the environmental watch judging with a couple of dates taken out as well, which will be added in.
So, if I could, Chairman, that those meetings will be out in the areas where
They're
we're
at the councils. It's speaking to the council. So it's STC council workshop, Gore council meeting, and ICC committee meeting.
Very good. Any no further advances? Would somebody like to move the changes? Moved by John, seconded by Paul. All in favour will say aye. Aye. And the last part of the open meeting is 10.9, the common seal. This one normally doesn't take very long. So. Moved by Jeremy. Seconded by Robert. All in favour will say aye. Aye. Right, that will conclude the public part of the meeting, and we have a very short public exclusion before the meeting terminates. So I'll ask if we're
moving into public excluded to confirm the minutes of the ordinary meeting of council of the 25th of June, the adoption of committee resolutions from the Strategy and Policy Committee on the 2nd of July, and to deal with item 12.1 long-term accommodation update. The reasons are set out on page 242 of the agenda, and the grounds are section 72J and 72H of the Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act.
okay. Haven't heard the reasons. Would somebody like to move? We move to public excluded. Moved by Jeremy, seconded by Robert. All in favour will say aye. Aye. Okay. So first up is the confirmation of the public excluded meetings of the meeting of the council.